Safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack. Safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack. Long we've tossed on the rolling main. Now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate. Folly, rolly, 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 rido.
Zoning Board of Appeals, it's Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. The meeting is being conducted on Zoom and recorded and uploaded to the website at a later date. So I'd like to turn it over first to Jen Oram to explain the rules and regulations that we're going to be following. And take it away, Jen.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So this evening we have 3 hearings and we have attendees coming for all 3. So I was going to just request that the chairman could read the what the hearing is, and then while we do that, after that I'll announce the people who are in attendance. We'll keep an eye on the Q&A as well. We have people there's one person who hasn't. If you haven't named yourself, please do. And as we name those people who are going to be coming, we'll promote them to panelists so they can participate. We'll mute them, and then you would just do it. It's the same process where the board asks questions, and then the applicant presents, the board asks questions, and then we can open it up to the public when you're ready via Q&A. Does that make sense?
Okay. Everybody okay with that? We'll continue. I'm sure Dave McMorris is en route. But at any rate, the agenda, the first piece of business on the agenda is listed as board reorganization, meaning would somebody like to run for chair and or vice chair? Currently sitting is myself, Woody Chittick, as chair, and Pete Gertica as vice chair, but I asked this question.
I'm more than happy to step down.
Well,
I think you guys are doing a great job. I don't see anyone raising their hand.
yeah, don't be too eager. Without a, no, I don't know. Does anybody have a hankering to be chair of the zoning board? I've been chair for quite a while and certainly wouldn't object, and my feelings wouldn't be hurt.
I move that we continue Woody Chittick as chair and Peter Gertica as vice chair.
I second that.
Oh my, so eager.
Uh-oh.
Okay, looks like we're in for it. Well, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that piece of business is taken care of. And next is a continued hearing on 75 Border Street for a residential dock. The applicants are Paul and Jill Tedeschi. And Jen, you want to let us know who may be present? Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
My microphone isn't working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Yes, we can.
I don't know what's going on. I'm having some technical issues. So we're going to be promoting Joshua Green from Merrill. And I don't see anyone else. I don't see any landowners. So I think that Joshua will present to us, and then we'll go from there. If there's anyone else, he can let us know.
Okay, and this is just noting that Dave McMorris has joined us.
Yes.
So we now have a full complement of 6 ZBA members. So Joshua, if you would take it away. This application was before us a month ago. You then went to the Conservation Commission, and maybe you could weave that into your presentation. I think, let us know what's different, new, or any conditions that they may have imposed.
Absolutely. So like you said, I'm Josh Green from Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors, representing Paul and Jill Tedeschi. As you also stated, the applications for a special permit for a residential pier on the property. Originally, the plan that we had before you was the location altered just slightly. It was a 4-foot tall pier and a 4-foot wide pier. The main differences is that it's now a 3-foot wide pier and a 3-foot high pier. And like I said, the location just tweaked a little bit. Also, can you hear me? I keep getting a connection unstable message.
I can hear you.
Okay, just
We'll
wanted to make
we'll
sure.
just nod rather than all speak. Yeah, go ahead.
So outside of that, like I said, it's now a 3-foot wide pier and a 3-foot high pier. That was the biggest change that kind of went on with it. As far as the location on the property, we centered it as best we could. We're utilizing an existing channel kind of in the salt marsh, more a conservation issue, but really it's just trying to keep it centered on the property the best we can. At its closest point to the property line, the pier is 46 feet approximately from the property line at the closest point. And outside of that, it really just kind of runs along that center line of the property. Through the conservation process, we did our best to avoid trees. We're utilizing kind of existing walkways and cleared paths through the trees that already exist. Really just trying to minimize the overall impact that the proposed structure has on the area. With that, I'd really like to just turn it over to questions, answer any ones that you might have.
LPU? Well, I'm not muted. I don't have any initial questions, at least. How about anybody else? Charlie, Dave? Dave is Mr. Doc. Have you had an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission yet, or have you just had a hearing?
We've had the hearing. I believe Jeff, I talked to Jeff a couple days ago about it. He was drafting it up. I don't know if it's been signed and everything yet. I know that it was being drafted. I believe actually yesterday, I think I talked to him.
Yeah, we like to certainly in our decisions reference a order of conditions, and in particular, we don't want there to be any conflict between where our board comes out, if at all possible, and the Conservation Commission. So it'd be helpful to have that in hand. But are you anticipating any news here or anything that's different from the plan that's submitted to the zoning board?
No, so the plan that you have is the revisions that they requested for the after our approval. So the revised plan that we provided to the conservation is the plan that you have. If it's dated, sorry, the revision date was 7/28.
Okay.
Mine is 7/29 received. Oh, I see, received, yeah, 7/28 is when it was drafted, yeah. Okay, what about the board?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from me.
Peter?
No, I don't have any questions. I mean, it's obviously a very long approach, but that's not necessarily a zoning issue in and of itself.
I had one small nit, I guess, or at least I don't understand it. I think the application dealt with the on the area regulations, and now that I'm moving paper around, I can't find it, but it talked about the ground coverage being 6 feet or something to that effect, but also that the piers would be either 4 feet by 4 feet, or 4 inches by 4 inches, or 6 inches by 6 inches. I don't understand how 50 some odd pilings can only cover 6 feet of land.
6 square.
I unfortunately I don't have the.
Yeah.
No, it's on the second sheet. I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the overall direct impact of the piles. Let me just.
Yeah. I mean, it's really the statistics that are going to be on file, and
It's 54 pilings above mean high water. With
Yeah,
a coverage of 6 square feet, which, unless you're using toothpicks, doesn't
make sense. And then I would go with the larger of the two if you haven't decided, which is 6 inches by 6 inches, half a foot. So 54 would tell you to be 26. So it's all right, but I don't like to see 6 feet when in fact the ground coverage may be 26 feet.
Yeah, so I just did it real quick. So if they were all, most of them are 4x4s. It's not that
Okay.
we're picking between the two. It's towards the end of the pier. There's 6x6s. As we move inland, it's 4x4s.
Yeah.
But just so we can do it real quick, if it's all 6x6s, which it isn't, each piling is 0.25 square feet. So if they were all that times 62 would be 15 square feet. Would be the math on that one. So with the 4x4s, you're shrinking it by about a third, which is bringing you, just doing it in my head, awfully close to the. Now I missed it. Square footage of 6.
Okay.
Yeah, because a half by a half is a quarter of a square foot, not a half a square foot. Woody.
Yeah, that's where I went off in terms of my
Yeah.
mental arithmetic.
No, I did some math along those lines earlier, and I didn't have the breakdown of the, but it didn't pose a zoning issue the way I looked at it.
No, my only concern was were the statistics
Yeah.
accurate, and apparently they are. Yeah, I see where it is. Okay, anybody else? Sure.
It gives me a sort of thought to maybe have a conversation at a future date about the bylaw in a couple of ways, but I don't see how this proposal is counter to the bylaw from the zoning perspective.
David, what do you think? You agree?
Yeah, I really hate these really long piers, but it's more of a conservation issue than ours.
Yeah.
And I assume the Conservation Commission went the 3 feet as opposed to the 4 feet for that very reason?
Yeah,
Or was
that's
it
more
for
to-
safety?
It was a mix of a lot of things. The biggest thing I think being aesthetics. They just wanted to reduce the visual impact with the Gulf being such a natural area. So I think that was the biggest thing. But there was multiple issues that kind of had us go from 4 feet to 3 feet.
Okay, well, I don't have any other questions. Charlie or Matt?
I have no questions. I agree with Peter Goodicke.
Okay, Lee.
I have no questions.
All
I
right.
wonder,
well,
I wonder if
Right.
we know where this ranks in terms of the longest docks in Cohasset.
Number 1? What do you think, Joshua?
I know during conservation we had quite a few that got brought up because I mean, really, this is a pier that's 138 feet. They have a walkway. I know we're getting nitpicky between the difference between the structures, but the pier is about 138 feet. There's I know of at least 2 off the top of my head that are longer than that.
Longer than the pier, but not necessarily longer than the walkway and the pier put together.
One of them, I believe, is still longer. There's a decent one if
Okay.
you go towards the Situate border. There's a one that's quite significant.
Even longer. So this is only the silver medal for length, not the,
Yeah,
not the gold.
unfortunately, we're not getting the gold on that one, I don't think.
Well, I applaud you for not getting the gold then.
Okay, well, I would move that we continue the hearing in order to have a draft decision to review next month. But I don't think we have any other questions for you. Jen? Oh, are there people here? Yeah, please, let me take that back.
So we have one person who has named themselves administrator, but we can't open that up until they rename themselves. So if this is a comment regarding this, this particular hearing, please rename yourself. Otherwise, I won't open it just because of Zoom bombing. So if we could have that name. The other hand that is up is our council, which I will promote during 35 Oak. So other than that, I don't see any questions and there's nothing in the Q&A.
Okay. Was it appropriate to?
I second the motion to continue the hearing.
Okay, all in favor? And Jen, do we have to do this by our name? In other
Yes, you need to do a roll call vote, please.
Okay,
Peter Gertica, aye.
Charlie Higginson, aye.
Go ahead, Lee. Lee Darst, okay. Woody Chidick,
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
all right.
As a point of interest, do we all see the pictures in the same order?
I don't think
I
so.
see Woody, me, and Lee on the top row, and then Charlie, Matt, and David
No.
on the second row.
No,
No.
No, it's
Different.
different.
Okay, so the easy way of voting, which if we saw the same screen, would be to just kind of go around the circle, but that's not going to work. So
We should do alphabetical.
there you go.
Gee, that's gonna be.
We'd have to know the alphabet.
All right. Well, anyway,
it's you
so
first, Lee.
Yeah, I'm second.
two
Woody.
second.
yeah.
See,
Oh yeah.
we're already running into roadblocks here, or
All right.
impediments. Anyway, let's open a new hearing next. It's 35 Oak Street. It's an appeal of the building inspector's decision to deny a building permit. Jen, is this again when you speak to who's going to be presenting and who's here on behalf of the client or applicant, rather?
Yes, so for 35 Oak Street, we have Attorney Walter Sullivan, who will promote. And other parties of interest was John Cavanero, who I don't see. So we can have Attorney Sullivan let us know if anybody else is in attendance that should be promoted. And we also have our counsel, Cindy Amara, who will also be promoted to join us. And Cindy works with Karis North, who is our special counsel.
And at this time, I would like to recuse myself from this hearing as I have a professional business relationship with Michael Baker, the appellant.
Okay.
I missed almost all of that. Lee,
Yeah, I didn't get your professional relationship part. But Lee, are you muted? Are you listening?
you look muted. I didn't hear what she said.
Lee, now you're okay.
She broke up to the point where I didn't hear anything.
I feel I need to recuse myself because I have a professional business relationship with Michael Baker. So I would like to sit at the back of the room for this. So I will mute myself.
Okay. All right, so there'll be 5 of us sitting, and I see we have Attorney Sullivan here, and I think you can proceed with your presentation. You're muted.
How's
Okay.
that?
Yeah,
I've
good,
been
good.
trying to do that for years. Walter Sullivan, attorney for the property owners, NIWDA, Michael and Anne Marie Baker. My clients, as the chairman noted, are seeking reversal of the building inspector's decision that 35 Oak Street, Lot 99 specifically, is not eligible for a building permit. By way of background, my clients acquired title to this property, which is an 8,018 square foot vacant lot, and they acquired title back in January of this year. There's a single family home that is also part of the property, which is lot 100, an identical amount of square footage that they also acquired title from. They would like to get a building permit to build a home on this lot that's adjacent to. This lot originally had over 9,000 square feet. When you calculate in land through the derelict fee statute on Oak Street, the town, of course, took Oak Street, which was a private way, in 1988. I had written a letter to the building inspector in April 3 of 2020, alluding to a case that this board had decided previously on Oak Street, making a determination that with calculation of the land under the derelict fee statute, and the fact that the plan shows this lot back in 1901 that was recorded with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds, that it's satisfied for a building permit. Mr. Egan originally agreed with me and sent me a letter on May 13 to that effect. And then he reversed himself on June 1, indicating that he did not believe that a taking of the road back in 1988 constituted an eminent domain, and he drew a distinction that he didn't think that we should be able to calculate that square footage. We have appealed, and now that's why we're here before you. We make reference to section 8.3.2 of your zoning bylaw, which speaks to what will qualify as a buildable lot, as a grandfather protected buildable lot, and that is a lot that's shown on a recorded plan prior to zoning, and one that at the time that the plan is recorded meets with dimensional requirements and frontage requirements and setbacks, and it has to be at least 9,000 square feet. So I think it's clear that we meet 1 and 2. The decision that this board previously held found that in 1988, all of these lots satisfied the 9,000 square foot requirement. In fact, in the decision, I think one of the board members noted that there are 38 buildable lots of this size, and that all of them prior to 1988 would in fact be buildable lots. Now, in fact, by 1988, almost all of them had single family homes on them, except my clients did not. And I think the crux of the decision is that, well, it doesn't make sense to harm somebody who doesn't have a house on the lot under that theory. So based on that decision, my clients are in the position that they should be eligible for a building permit. And so we're asking this board to reverse the building inspector and grant them a building permit. You have before you a plan that Mr. Calvanaro drew, which sets out the lot, and it calculates the current square footage. If you add in the square footage before 1988, that's an additional 1,200. So it would actually total 9,000, approximately 20 square feet, easily satisfying 8.3.2. So we would respectfully request that the board reverse Mr. Egan and find that this lot is eligible for a building permit. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me just first say that the provision in the bylaw has changed a little bit in the last couple of years, and you're referencing 8.3 rather than 1, 2, and 3. They're now A, B, and C. So it's B. For instance, you quoted from B2. Just I would like to clear, be consistent.
So, Mr. Chair, 8.3.2C, is that correct?
8.3B2.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you.
No, it's yeah. It was renumbered or relettered or whatever, but it's going to get confusing. Secondly, just administratively, your application was missing any data on Section 8, which will have to be submitted to us at some date, within the next few weeks. But anyway, so there was no area data, setbacks or anything else of that sort. And that's just for the record.
Woody, is that because the house has not yet been designed for?
Well, I guess it could be.
We could have the lot size and the
area lot size. I'd like it, and
but I don't think we could have the setback information.
Yeah, maybe you're right. That's right. Okay. I don't know who wants to jump into this first.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Your client bought this lot in January.
That's correct.
In January, it was an 8,000 square foot lot. And in January, it was not a beneficiary of the derelict fee statute because Oak Street was by then a public way. And the land was not taken from your client. And your client bought a lot that was 8,000 square feet and only 8,000 square feet and didn't have the technical advantage of having the extra 1,200 or whatever it was before the street was taken. So I'm not clear on why you think it's a 9,000 square foot lot.
Well, because we were relying on the Rosebach decision that this board handed down in 2018. So we had seen the decision, the basis for it, and on that calculation, we assumed it applied to all vacant lots in this neighborhood under that theory. We didn't see why it wouldn't. It didn't seem to distinguish that you had to own it prior to 1988 when the taking occurred. The rationale still seemed to apply.
Okay, well, that may be too much of a leap, but you have to keep in mind that the lot, why don't you start with your thesis that back in 1901, when these some 130 or so lots were all laid out, they were laid out and registered as 8,018 square feet. And you're positing that they really were registered as 9,218 square feet lots. I don't think that's so. You're saying that they have, through the derelict fee provision or statute, that they have that extra land on the street. But how does that? Could you explain the derelict fee provision in the general laws in easy to understand language? And I read it, and I admit I only had 5 minutes to read it, but it was left me a little bit at sea. So if you could deal with that, and then also deal with why that applies in this particular case.
I'll certainly try. So the derelict fee statute provides that when you have frontage on a way, that you own to the middle of that way. And it's not necessarily what's paved or improved, it's the way as it's laid out on the plan.
I'm sorry, does that apply to public ways as well, or just private ways?
No, because it was taken, it would just be the public. Once the public takes it, Mr. McForest, it owns it. Obviously, you would just have a right, like everybody else, to use it. But I think the nuance of the derelict fee statute, just by its very language, fee gives you fee ownership to the middle of the way, so far as you abut it. And so we've calculated that as every other lot on Oak Street to be 1,200 square feet. Because all these lots are 60 feet wide. So there's no question that my clients understood that the deed indicated 8,018 square feet, Mr. Chittick. There's no question about that. But relying upon the interpretation set out in a prior decision, the case law that the applicant cited in that the Backus case, we interpreted that to mean that we have a 9,000 square foot lot and therefore satisfy the requirements of 8.3.2. So that's our theory. I understand the question. We didn't own it in 1988 before the road was taken, but based on the case law, it was our belief that we satisfied the requirement for a 9,000 square foot lot.
The other thing, Dave, let me just, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Our definition of lot in the bylaw says that it's defined by meets and bounds or boundary lines in a recorded deed or recorded plan. If the extra 1,200 square feet is not part of the record, it wasn't, if it was not recorded, it may not be part of a lot as far as the provisions of single lot exemption our
argument is that
concerned.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you ready for me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I think our argument is that the way was always shown on the plan. It may not have been calculated until more modern surveys were done. But once it was calculated under the derelict fee statute, we get the benefit of that. And obviously we rely on the Backus case that was part of this board's decision in the Rosebach decision a couple of years ago. So, we're just trying to to utilize what we believe to be the proper interpretation of the case law. But we're not purporting that, we've owned it prior to the taking. We're just saying we interpreted it to mean that that was still available to us. And I guess my argument would be, Mr. Chair, that it's all part of the recorded plan. So it's in there, even if it just hadn't been calculated till more modern times.
And even if it hadn't been, registered or recorded.
No, but it was. I mean, I think the way is shown on the recorded plan in 1901. It may not have been calculated in meets and bounds by a surveyor, but it shows a lot on a plan on a way. Oak Street's there on the 1901 plan.
Dave, over to you.
Well, I think in the deed, the meets and bounds are described without the way. And I hadn't thought about Woody's point earlier that how we define lot in our bylaws. It would seem that
Whoops.
indeed,
We lost you, Dave.
Dave, could
kind of-
you,
Dave, we lost you.
Dave, you're frozen.
There you're back.
Ah.
Nope, now he's gone completely.
I'm gone completely now. Hold on.
I can hear you.
Huh.
Well, why don't you speak? I mean, that's
Okay.
at least,
Um,
but start from the top to your point.
Oh, he's
because
back.
We lost
He's
it
back.
all.
I think, that I hadn't thought of Woody's point that we define lot in our bylaws. And the lot is defined as the meets and bounds that are described in the deed. And the deed doesn't describe any meets and bounds that include that part of the way that's in the derelict fee statute. So although technically the lot owner may own that square footage in the way, it doesn't necessarily mean that under the definition in our bylaws that it's actually part of the lot. The other issue that occurs to me is these lots are in common ownership and neither one of them meets the minimum lot size in the zone. And I think that we may have an issue with the doctrine of merger as well. These lots may be one lot at this point.
So I hear what you're saying. Under 48 Section 6, obviously the merger comes into play. But you guys have a bylaw that deals with this, and instead of 5,000 square feet, it says 9,000. So I think the purpose of 8.3.2, Mr. McMorris, was to avoid merger. So I think the issue is, do we get credit for that extra square footage? Because if it's 9,000 square feet, merger doesn't matter. It's a vacant lot, it's protected, it's on. I think that's what 8.3.2 is saying, is you can hold it in common ownership. And as long as it's on a recorded plan and identified as a separate lot and it's vacant, and you met the appropriate square footage and setbacks when the plan was recorded, which we do because there were none in 1901, and you're 9,000 square feet, then you are a single lot exemption under your bylaw. I think that, and I obviously wasn't part of it, and perhaps some of you were and can address this, but I think that would be the interpretation to avoid merger and to allow somebody on a vacant lot only to preserve their status for a buildable lot. I think that avoids merger because you have a bylaw that addresses it.
And I think that's probably right if there's 9,000 square feet there. And that's the question.
There's
And
the
I think we're kind of thinking about whether or not we decided that other case correctly.
And also, I would like to reserve the right to really study the derelict fee statute to be sure that it does or may apply to this lot. I mean, I don't know whether there are any sort of sub provisions and whatever that might qualify or disqualify an application.
I think on my limited research, Mr. Chair, I think the analysis is based on each municipality because you have to factor in each municipality's own bylaw. And the case that you folks alluded to in your decision, the Bacchus case, turned on whether or not the local bylaw, and I think that's in Nantucket, to find property to include land that was the derelict fee statute. And the court reversed the zoning board of appeals in Nantucket because it found that you didn't. But then the court went on to look at the common definition of what property meant. And they looked at Black's Law Dictionary, and they looked at the common usage under the American Law Dictionary, and they came to the conclusion that it would be all that a person owned, and therefore that it should have included the derelict fee statute land. And that's how the Backus case came down, and I think that's what was presented to you in that prior case.
Okay, well, that will be topic of further study. But at any rate, but keep in mind that as you acknowledged, our bylaws are not Nantucket's, and our definition of lot really does deal with a very specific plan that's registered. And I'm sure back in 1901, this plan was registered. And subsequently, all the lots that I've seen, including somebody that was, had applied to this board or applied to the building inspector and failed to get a building permit, had gone to court, and the court determined that their lot was 8,018 square feet. So it's at best murky in my mind. I think we have to take, you can certainly argue, well, not argue, but certainly make the case that we should take the definition of lot in our bylaws literally, as opposed to it includes what's registered plus. There's no mention in our bylaws of a derelict fee provision. That would have made it easier, but therein lies the rub.
Well,
anyway, other people, I'd like to hear from other board members. Yeah, Peter.
Attorney Sullivan, to what extent are the circumstances of this pair of lots identical to or not identical to the circumstances of the two lots that we dealt with 3 years ago?
I would make the argument, Mr. Gadecki, that they're virtually identical. The square footage is identical. I think there's 1 square foot difference, 8,017 on the lot 2 years ago, and this is 8,018. This is a single family home and then a vacant lot. So frontage is 60 feet on Oak Street. So I think, and without the 1,200 square feet from the derelict fee, then that would not have been a buildable lot.
To what extent do you know whether or not the owner of the previous lot had owned it in 1998?
I think 1988 is the year for taking.
88 or 98? I thought you're...
I might have misspoke. I'm pretty sure it's 1988.
Okay.
The deed, and actually from that other one, I believe.
No, the taking plan was dated July 1998.
That's what I remember. So
anyway.
But the circumstances are the circumstances the same if it were 98, that we have an owner who is new since 98. Was it an owner who was new since 98 when we decided this in 2017? I'm just asking as a matter of fact at the moment.
I have the deed. There was a deed in this property in 2015. So there was a deed after. I don't know if it's, honestly, it was a deed from Mullen to the Poland Family Trust.
Are we talking about your property or the other property?
No, the other.
The other property. Okay, thank you.
And when did your clients acquire the property?
January, you said.
January of this year, 2020?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on that, but I think that can wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I spent most of my time, was to just go back, kind of look at the other decision that we had made. But the thing that jumped at me, like David mentioned right off the bat, was, you know, in a recent transaction, this property owner knew what the square footage was on this property and whether or not.
But that was the case, Matt, that was the case in the other one too. So I think we must have decided in the other one anyway, that, you know, whether or not the current owner deserved the benefit. The previous owner, you know, presumably somewhere in the chain before, somebody was relying on the value of that lot, one way or another. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I'd also remember.
The original recollection when I went back to it was that we were going to see that the other lot was grandfathered, which, you know, by that, I mean, you know, that it was an owner prior to 1998, which
yeah, wasn't. Yeah,
I think that, you know, from the board's perspective, it doesn't mean that we have to look at it through the exact same lens necessarily. I think that there's some value to also bringing up that somebody recently purchased the property, and it was, at the time that they purchased it, this is what the square footage was, you know, and kind of put that on the table as well.
It seems to me if somebody had, it seems to me that it would have been possible for somebody to go to the court and say, look, my deed is flawed. It's really 9,200 square feet because it goes to the middle of the road. Well, nobody's done that, chosen to do that. The lots as recorded and the lots that have been transferred and so on and so forth are all 8,018 or 17. So I think there may be a difference between your right to either own or use or something. The Nantucket case had more to do with use of a well in a way. In other words, the people were putting a septic system in, and I think it went over the literal lot into the way. But that may be different than a lot. You know, your right to, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'd have to study this, but. Yes, please, Walter, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think the rub here is the difference between clear title and zoning. The lot in this case and in 36 Oak Street, which is directly across the street, are on a plan that always said they were 8,018 square feet. We don't dispute that. But for purposes of zoning, we're saying that you get the benefit of land from the derelict fee. I'm not sure that I read the Nantucket case as turning on, it wasn't a buildable lot unless they used the derelict fee statute land to put their well on it, and because it was going to give them difficulty with the septic system, as I read the case. I'd be happy to supply the board with a memorandum on the derelict fee statute, and I think the difference between zoning and clear title. There's no way anybody could go to the Registry of Deeds and say, I get the benefit of this 1,200 square feet on the derelict fee, change my deed. That's not how it would work, because I think it's more of a zoning issue than a title question. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think there's a distinction for purposes of this board's determination.
I follow your logic. Yeah. I mean, and that's, you know, if it were that, if we could resolve this in 5 minutes, you know, life would be good, but this is complicated. And I think you put your finger on it. How about other board members? Because I think, you know, the other thing I'd like to see, because it just doesn't jump out at me. In our 1917 decision, we referenced the town's taking plan, the taking plan of 1998, plan of taking. I'd like to see that Again, because it was referenced in the decision. And whether we have the same mindset today or interpretation today as we might have 3 years or longer ago is interesting, but it's not binding. I mean, I'd like to be consistent, but also reasonable in terms of prior decisions. And in this case, I don't know. I'd like to do more research, and I'm sure we all would like to do a little more research, but I would like to see that town's plan of taking to see how they denoted all this.
I can provide that to you.
Great. Charlie, it's
A minor nitpick, but the plan does not show the structures adjacent as required by our rules.
oh yeah, that's right. John Cavanero's, yeah, both the looks like McCusker and the Sumser lots. So John should amend his site plan to include the two neighboring, the lots on either side, the lot on either side.
We will do that.
And also the, I know the Bacchus case was submitted as evidence 3 years ago. Again, not having had a chance to do what, really serious pondering. It applies in part. I'm not sure it applies exactly, and that's another thing I'd like to, reserve a couple of weeks to look at. Almost every court case, as we all know, is yes, there's precedent, but also there are nuances that are local in nature, and I think the Nantucket case is not exactly parallel. It's not irrelevant, but it's not exactly parallel.
I would also be interested in how many other vacant lots that are 8,000 or 9,000 feet in this development, so that this decision will affect other lots.
Yeah, and there's something we can't do. If we could get in the Wayback Machine and go back to 1969 or 55, we could ask the drafters of the bylaw, particular 8.3, why they settled on 9,000 square feet, knowing that there were some 130 lots in the hillside at 8,000 square feet. Did they deliberately mean to eliminate the application of 8.3, or were they thinking of the derelict statute, or was it done without any forethought at all? Well, we won't know. We won't know. But what that bylaw does, it either applies, it applies to one way or another an awful lot of lots, and including, Peter, I guess, lots that are yet to be built on.
We can calculate what lots still remain available, and we can get that to the board. I don't think there's that many.
Well, there may not be that many on Oak Street, but there are a lot of private ways taken in town.
That may be. I'm sorry. I was just trying to address Oak Street.
Yeah, and I'd say there's probably at least 3 to 5 that I counted with a quick ride up Oak Street that would fall into this category.
And the 9,000 square feet was chosen for some reason, goodness knows what, but this was not to be a blanket coverage, I'm sure, for every vacant lot in the town. Anyway, well, I think we've got to, I don't know. I mean, let's hear from other, if we don't have any other questions from the board, I'd like to hear, is Bob Egan in attendance, Jen?
He was.
I'd like to hear from him next if he's available, and I'd like to see if anybody else on on the call is on the call for this particular hearing.
Yes. So Bob's being promoted to panelist, and if I may, just, we do have a couple of comments in the Q&A, and I just want to take this opportunity to say that the board received 3 letters from 3 abutters, all of which were forwarded to the zoning board and Attorney Sullivan. And I'm just going to read the names of those letters. I know that one of the abutters is on the Q&A and refers to the letter. So the letters we will have, so if there's other comments, we would want to hear only new comments, not what's covered in the letter. All 3 letters were in opposition. And those letters came from Deirdre and Brian Riley of 31 Pond Street, Ann and Patrick McCluster of 41 Oak Street, and Jean Roma of 42 Oak Street. And we have all of those. And if anybody who is attending the meeting would like copies, they can email me and I can certainly supply those, and they'll all be part of the permanent record. So Bob is here. Bob, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Yep, I think I'm here now.
There you are.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has a specific question. I think I think I.
Well, why don't you tell us your logic here? I think it'd be helpful to hear it from you.
Well, I think it was based on the fact that there's a protection on lots losing their size and their ability to be built on when there is a taking, where land is taken from them for and while it may not say it directly, I always thought of it as a public taking, an eminent domain taking. And the example I used in my letter was when they resurrected the commuter rail and they took land from people. And I don't know, I can't think of any example where somebody would have lost enough land to then make their lot unbuildable. But I think the zoning and our bylaw in particular protects somebody from losing that ability because of the eminent domain taking for the public good. I don't think that Oak Street, I think Oak Street was taken. Well, I know it was taken when they put the sewer in on the hillside, and they realized that all the other streets on the hillside were public ways. They had been taken, they had been accepted at the town meeting, and Oak Street somehow slipped by in the last 90 years. And this was just more an administrative remedy for an oversight rather than the actual physical taking of land. I don't think the people on Oak Street I don't think the people on Oak Street probably knew that their street had not been a public way. I don't think anybody thought that they owned to the center of the road and that it was theirs, and that they lost land of value when the lot was taken. So I just thought this would, I kind of questioned the original decision, and only more curiosity. But now I can see that if this decision is affirmed, it will apply to several lots, and if it's overturned, it will apply to several lots. And so I think it's worthy of a second thought, a second review of the concerns and the facts.
Bob, I've got a question for you. If these other takings that apply to, well, not Norfolk so much, but Ash, I guess, and Short Street, things of that sort, if those takings happened in the past and also allowed all the lot owners there to go to the middle of the street, some of these other lots would also become legally buildable, I would think, or would have had that right at any rate. And
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what size those lots were, but the fact is that Short Street and Ash Street and the other hillside streets are already public ways, and I don't think anybody could claim the derelict fee statute on those. Those have already.
They couldn't look back. Sorry,
can I jump in here? In that 1998 taking,
oh, you've got, okay.
they took Short Street, Norfolk Road, Rocky Lane, Reservoir Road, and Oak Street.
Okay, then I was incorrect. I thought Oak Street was the only street on the hillside that had not been taken many years past.
No, so the whole raft of lots.
Yeah, and it, you know, it's the town meeting authorization was to acquire it by purchase, gift, or eminent domain. But I didn't see any record that they paid anything for it. They just, essentially that it was to make public the private way. It's been kind of treated as a public way all the time anyway. Town plowed it, town maintained it. And nobody was paying taxes on it that abutted it.
As a point of fact, Norfolk would not require extra land to make any lots there buildable. The lots on Short Street are too small. Even if you did add to the center of Short, it wouldn't impact anything. And Ash on both sides has lots similar to Oak Street. So if Ash was part of it, it has the same complication, but the others do not.
And there's one on Cushing. I don't know if Cushing was part of that taking or not. I mean, that's just a small point, but yeah, Peter, there's
all I'm trying to do is point out which ones are relevant.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that really is relevant, but just from a physical standpoint, some of those streets aren't fertile ground for this.
Right. Everything in Hill Street would. Oh no,
but keep in mind that this Residence A is a 9,000 square foot issue, but there's also in that section of the bylaw single lot exemptions in Residence B and Residence C as well. And there are a number of streets that have been taken and converted from private to public ways in those zones. And, you know, we have no idea how all this plays out elsewhere in town.
Right, but those are much bigger, 15 and 20,000 feet. So the delta that you'd be adding from to the center of a street is much less likely. I'm not saying there's none of them, but I think we have two relatively unique streets. I'm not sure that this argument is relevant anyway. I think we really need to personally, I think we need to think about whether our decision last time was correct or not correct. Rather than considering the impact on the town of 3 more lots, you know, either we were right or we weren't right. It's not up to us to figure out the impact.
True.
Bob, is that it for you, or?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Jen, who else is on the line?
All right, so we just have the owner just addressing the items that Attorney Sullivan mentioned before, and he wrote, this is from Mr. Baker, as an owner of NIWIDA LLC, the purchase of the land was based on Roseback, and we relied upon the decision. Roseback also purchased a lot in recent years on or near 2015.
Okay. And is that it for other people?
That was all the comments. The only thing I would say is that if the board is going to require any sort of opinion or if there's going to be submissions from Attorney Sullivan, we do have a special counsel, Cindy Amara, with us this evening, and I didn't know if Cindy had anything to say, but also obviously the board would want our counsel to review anything submitted and be able to respond. So we need to look at timelines. In addition, where this is an appeal, I would be requesting to get a continuation letter before we hit the 100 days. So if Attorney Sullivan, if I could email you and request a date for the board, we'd probably look for September or October, probably October 30th to be safe, just because of the 100-day requirement. And that's all I had to say for right now. But Cindy, Mara's here. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to.
Sure, Cindy. Amara?
I've been listening to all sides of this, and I would like an opportunity to review whatever Attorney Sullivan presents, as well as to really, I have not had an opportunity to delve into as deeply the prior decisions as I think the issue warrants. And I think that it's a very complicated issue that probably warrants the board taking a little bit of time to really digest everything that's been presented and will be presented, and to respond thoroughly to it.
Okay, and I guess Attorney Sullivan as well, you're going to give us a, if you will, a brief or a white paper on the layman's meaning of the derelict fee law and how that does, well, in this case, you would make the case, I'm sure, that it does apply here, but that would be useful reading for all of us.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Great. With that, I would recommend that unless people have an objection, that we continue this hearing until September. Any?
I'll second that.
All right, I've moved it and seconded. All in favor? Woody Chidick, aye.
Peter Gertica, aye.
Charlie Higginson, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, and yes, that's right, Lee is.
Yeah, he is recused.
But where's David?
He disappeared, I
Where's
think.
David?
Oh, he left. And he was having some connection issues.
All right,
But
well,
Lee can come back. Cindy, do you think you'd mind staying for the next hearing?
Sure, that's fine.
All right, thank you.
okay, so it's voted 4-0 to continue the hearing until September.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate the effort that you put in. All right, so we have we have our third hearing. It's 11 Sheldon Road. We're a little bit late, but not much. Regarding Lee Schwartz as an applicant, represented by her attorney, Adam Brodsky. Who wants to convert an existing barn/boathouse into a recreation room at 11 Sheldon Road. So do we have Attorney Brodsky on the line?
We do. So if we could promote Attorney Brodsky, and then we also have we have the owner and the builder as well, who can remain as attendees until Attorney Brodsky would like us to promote them as a panelist. Does that work for you, Attorney Brodsky?
Yes,
Is there
Ms. Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm just going to disappear.
Not forever. Okay, so Attorney Brodsky, would you lead off, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chittick. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you again. I represent Lee Schwartz, who's the owner of 11 Sheldon Road. And we have available this evening, if we need them, Laura Murphy, our designer with Red Barn Studio, and Nino DeNuno, who is Ms. Schwartz's contractor. And we have yet an unusual set of circumstances in the town of Cohasset. I should know that I heard that Mr. Egan, the building commissioner, is on the line, and we're really here at his direction. This property consists of approximately 36,000 square feet and is located within the Residence C district. There's presently a single-family residence and a barn boathouse on the property. The boathouse was constructed via a special permit issued in 1998. The lot is lawfully non conforming, and I'm just going to focus on the boathouse. The boathouse conforms to all dimensional requirements, but in 1998, the Zoning Board of Appeals required a special permit because the construction of a new structure on a pre-existing non-conforming lot, in the board's opinion, required a special permit. I note that boathouses are allowed as accessory residential buildings and residential use in the C district. The bylaw, I believe, was the same in 1998 as presently, and I note that guest houses are also allowed uses. The Zoning Board of Appeals in 1998 conditioned the special permit for the boathouse use to not contain plumbing or to be used as a guest house, which I have difficulty understanding because, again, this was an allowed use at the time, and it was suggested to us that this condition was put in the special permit to appease the neighbors who opposed the project in 1998. And as Mr. Chittick indicated, Ms. Schwartz wants to convert the boathouse use to a residential recreation use, a recreation room, and to install a bathroom and kitchenette, which obviously would require plumbing in the building. Again, and I'm repeating myself, but I believe that the recreation room is an allowed use, as these activities are typically contained in a guest house. And it was my sense that converting the allowed boathouse use to another allowed use did not require zoning relief. And in fact, at first blush, I thought that it could be done with a building permit. However, Mr. Egan was reluctant to issue a building permit for this project without first coming to the board to discuss the issue, and he advised us to apply for a Section 6 finding or a special permit. Ultimately, if you decide that we don't need zoning relief, we're prepared to request the withdrawal of the application. But if you decide we need relief, then we request either the grant of a Section 6 finding or a special permit at the Zoning Board of Appeals discretion. We're not intensifying any nonconformity. The nonconformity is the lot area, and we're swapping one permitted use for another permitted use, which I don't think can be found to be substantially more detrimental. It was our assumption that the neighbors would prefer the accessory residential use, the recreation room, as opposed to the boathouse. But that may not be the case. And I don't know if it's appropriate to speak to this issue now, or you want me to respond to it, but we were kindly provided with a copy of a letter from Richard Henderson dated August 4th, 2020. It's actually addressed apparently to his client, but provided to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Richard appears to be representing the abutters who apparently are also opposing, who opposed the boathouse originally and appear to be concerned with what we're proposing. I don't know whether the board's had a chance to see Richard's letter, but and as you know, I have the utmost respect for Richard, who has forgotten more about Cohasset zoning than I've ever known, but I found his letter to be inconsistent in this matter. In the first instance, he seemingly agrees that we don't require zoning relief to change the use. However, he seems to suggest that we're stuck with the boathouse use conditions in perpetuity, which makes no sense. Obviously, we don't wish to maintain the boathouse and want to change the use to yet another allowed use. And I respectfully suggest that a bathroom and a kitchenette are customally associated with a residential guest house. Richard suggests that even if we wanted to request the amendment of the boathouse use special permit, we couldn't do it because the appeal period has long since run, and or that would somehow require a butter approval. again, we're not seeking to amend the boathouse special permit because we don't want to operate a boathouse. We want to have our recreation room, which is more akin to the guest house use. So there would be no reason for us to amend the special permit. But I respectfully suggest that Richard's wrong in the law. I mean, we could seek to amend the special permit long after the appeal period. I've had occasion to request boards to amend special permits on remand from the land court years after the issuance of special permits. And there's no requirement that you get a butter approval. In fact, I've had amendments granted over a butter objections. You'd have to have a public hearing, and obviously would be up to the discretion of the board to allow an amendment or not. But again, there's no reason to amend a special permit to eliminate conditions relating to a boathouse use, since we don't want to use the property in that manner. So I was perplexed by this notion that somehow we'd be stuck with these use restrictions in perpetuity when we want to propose to use the structure for another allowed residential use. So I do know that Laura is available if you have questions regarding the floor plan. It's fairly basic, but I certainly can make her available to you so you can understand more particularly what we're proposing. We're really looking for guidance from the zoning board as to how to address this issue, and in particular, how to address Mr. Egan's concerns. Thank you.
Okay. Well, who would like to lead off here?
I have just an observation. It's that looking at the floor plan, if you put a bed where the pool table is, it's a guest house. The thing that puzzles me is in the conditions, it wasn't just a matter of not allowing plumbing. There was a specific reference to it not being used as a guest house as one of the conditions of the special permit. And if the building wasn't there at all and you wanted to build the guest house, you would have to come for a special permit, presumably. And I wasn't on the board then, and it's not expressly in the board's decision of when the boathouse was granted, but it seemed pretty clear to me reading in the decision that there was a great deal of concern about whether or not this would be substantially detrimental to the neighborhood. There seemed that there was a lot of concern by neighbors, and my just sort of feeling that I got from reading the decision is it was a fairly close call on the board's part. And I don't assume that the condition that was put in there was just to mollify the neighbors. You know, if I'm going to make an assumption, I would assume that it was an essential part of the board's deliberations and decision. I don't know what's changed between then and now.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McMorris. I generally agree with you because I have no personal knowledge regarding the circumstances. But in reading the opinion, the concern was with the operation of the boathouse operations, noise whatsoever. There's nothing in the decision that leads me to draw any conclusions why the zoning board prohibited and allowed use in this building. So I agree, if there was no boathouse there and the board has determined that we need a special permit to build an accessory structure on this lot because it's non-conforming, we would require a special permit, which is likely one of the reasons why Mr. Egan has sent me to this board. But we're not talking about constructing a new structure. We're talking about changing the use from one allowed use to another allowed use. So it's, again, the issue is not constructing a new building, it's simply changing the use. But I can't divine why the board, if the board even could prohibit an allowed use within a structure that's been granted a special permit.
Well, it's a conditioned special permit.
Yeah,
Not
it
just
needs a special
blanket special
permit because it's on a non-conforming lot, and I would assume the neighbors must have been concerned about noise or whatever else going on in a lot that was smaller than average in that part of town.
Again, all I can do is read, and the complaints were with the proposed boathouse use. They were not proposing a guest house. And again, my assumption is that a residential use is less impactful than a commercial, or this was not a commercial use, but an industrial use that was being proposed.
You may well be correct, Adam, but that was not the thinking on the part of the board as I read this. The board felt that a recreational or a guest house or residence was more detrimental, or they wouldn't have put that condition in, prohibiting it. You know, I mean, I didn't sit in this decision either, but so none of us can get into the mindset of those people, but they were obviously, to my mind, concerned enough to prohibit an allowed use. Otherwise allowed use, but in this case, a use that needed special permit approval. Perhaps.
Yes. Again, I've not seen as a condition of a special permit the prohibition of another allowed use that was not being proposed for a structure that was present before the board.
There must have been something going on there that didn't make it into the decision in terms of background.
Yes, sir. So, but we're faced with this condition, and we're here either for the board to say that we can move forward with a building permit, or to grant us again, I don't think it's a Section 6 finding. Again, we're following the lead of Mr. Egan. Then, a special permit for an allowed use, which, as I'm saying, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm saying that to you.
How about other board members? Lee, any points of view?
No, I don't. I'm listening.
Charlie, Matt, Peter?
No, I don't have
I would be more comfortable hearing a presentation akin to an application for a special permit for a guest house, because that's what we're doing here. And
Effectively, yeah.
I'm more than happy to address each of the requirements for a special permit for a guest house. They were articulated in my letter of June 19th, 2020 in support, and I'll go through each of the factors if you don't mind. One, the proposed change in use will not be substantially detrimental than the existing non-conforming use to the neighborhood. Again, we're proposing to change the use from the boathouse use to the accessory residential use. My point in my letter was that given that the recreation room is a permitted accessory use within the residency district, I made the point that I presumed that the use was consistent with the purposes of the zoning bylaw and per se not substantially more detrimental. It's an allowed use within this zoning district. But I went on to state further that the addition of another recreation room to the neighborhood is not going to change the characteristic of the neighborhood or undermine the health, safety, or general welfare of the town. I also pointed out that the change of use will not result in any detrimental impacts relating to ingress or egress to the property, the building, off-street parking or loading, traffic flow, danger of pollution, drainage, signs or exterior lighting, refuse collection, or economics. The change of use is also compatible with the neighborhood and in harmony with the adjacent properties and properties within the zoning district, which contain accessory guest houses, many of which would have recreational components and things like a kitchenette and a bathroom. And so it was my conclusion that the proposed recreation room will not be substantially detrimental than the existing use to the neighborhood. And second, that the change of use shall not be injurious or dangerous to the public health or hazardous because of traffic congestion or other reason. There are no exterior improvements being proposed. We're simply changing the use of the building from the boathouse to the recreation room. Nothing is going to change with respect to traffic or create traffic congestion or create any injury or danger to the public health. We're just converting the boathouse to the recreation room. And for those reasons, we would be entitled to a special permit.
Is this on sewer?
To the application.
Do you mean the lot on sewer, or do you mean
The building
is this
itself.
building itself
Well,
hooked
the
up?
building isn't because it doesn't have any plumbing, but
Right.
is that lot on a sewer system now?
Oh, yeah. Has to be.
Was it in 1998?
No.
So maybe that's why the condition was in there.
Which, again, I don't know Mr. McMorris, but in fact, if I don't know the answer, and I'm trying to look at the Cavanero plan, which unfortunately I have a smaller copy, and I'll need to get my reading glasses to read to confirm. But
Yeah.
we can ask Ms. Murphy to answer that question.
Murphy,
You may need to let her in.
Jen, you're controlling the, Jennifer, you're controlling the,
Yes, I just promoted her, and Laura's here now.
Yes, can you hear me?
yep.
Yes.
Yes, hello. Yes, this was not on sewer back in 1998. It subsequently has gone on sewer. The main house is on sewer. The boathouse was not on sewer. However, we have gotten preliminary approval through John Cavanero and the town sewer to attach to the sewer to the house. And the conditions that surrounded that somewhat of an approval was that we were giving up 2 bedrooms in the main house in order to go on this. So we have a preliminary approval if we can get the building permit to go on town sewer for this parcel of land.
Okay. Adam, it might be useful if there are freestanding recreational or guest houses in the neighborhood. You mentioned that this use is not uncommon in this area. It might be useful to get a list of, even if it's partial list of addresses and detached analogs to this proposal. Also, I don't know, I'm just playing devil's advocate. Knowing the way the Bobos worked at this point in time, it was Stephen Sr. By himself, and sometimes with his son, Steve Jr. I mean, there were virtually no other people in the boathouse, allowed or otherwise. So I would think the traffic would have been negligible. And maybe the concern was that with some sort of more residential, opposite of a project there, that there would be coming and going of cars, but it wasn't cited in the decision. I mean, traffic wasn't mentioned as a concern. None of the concerns were unfortunately mentioned in the decision.
It seems kind of logical that at the time in 1998, that having a guest house with plumbing on a septic system on the rocks on Sheldon Road may have been more detrimental to the neighborhood than the boathouse. And that may have been what the board was really concerned about in putting that condition in there. It's hard to see how having a guest house is going to be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than a boathouse. So why they would put a condition in there like that doesn't really make any sense unless there's something special about the plumbing issue. And that's the only thing I can think of that would have been a plumbing issue.
I can certainly find out what the thinking of the board was.
Oh, you have some sort of in with the former member, okay.
With respect to the septic system, either they could get a septic system installed or they could not. That would be the limiter of development. But that wouldn't be an issue for the Zoning Board of Appeals. That would be an issue for the Board of Health. So I don't think if the Board of Health granted a permit for an on-site septic system, I don't think that the Zoning Board of Appeals could or deny the grant of a special permit because of some other concern relating to Title V. But I have no knowledge, obviously, regarding those circumstances. And I do believe that the opinion did have specific concerns regarding impacts. And I'm trying to pull up the section because, again, it was all about the boathouse use.
Page 6, are you looking at page 6 of the former opinion?
Says as for problems of noise, traffic hazards, and congestion arising from the building of boats, they have to be. The section appears to give the neighbors the power to have any more than avocational boat building activity in the barn shut down. In other words, boat building for a profit.
Commercial.
Well, the other thing is of course, subsequent to the filing of this decision, there was an appeal filed and withdrawn in court. And I don't know whether this condition, of course, this condition preceded that. So I was wondering if condition number 6 was put in as to mollify unhappy neighbors and just have them withdraw objections. But trouble is, it just doesn't.
I'm not aware of a remand decision. I was led to believe that this was.
No, it was. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was led to believe that this was the decision that was appealed, and I can't speak to what happened at the appeal other than it was dismissed.
Withdrawn.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, and so the decision wasn't changed. So this section item 6 was pre-existed the appeal.
Yes, and I presume it was.
I have no idea. We can speculate, but. I don't know. Is anybody, are any of the neighbors represented tonight, Jennifer?
Yes. So Sam Wakeman in the Q&A did write, and it was his letter. I believe that he sent us the letter from Attorney Henderson. But he's written that the abutter's concern is that this will be used as a residence or a guest house.
Well, so I don't know what they mean by a residence. A guest house is something different.
Sam is here. I can promote him. Would you like to hear from Sam? I can promote him to speak if everybody's fine
If
with
you would
that.
like to, I'd certainly like to hear. Yeah.
All right. So Sam, we're just promoting you now so that you can. So Sam, you're on if you wanted to speak to the board or.
Okay. Am I still on mute or?
No, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. Never sure with Zoom. Our concern as abutters is that this could eventually turn into a residence and or a guest house. We view them as being substantially the same from a negative impact because once you have a guest house, you have a lot of additional traffic in and out as you might have with a residence.
Okay, Sam, there is a pretty big difference between a guest house and which is no money exchanged and so on and so forth, and intermittent usage, And the residences, a second residence is not allowed in area District C, at least a new building. And so I think the idea of a residence would be kind of far-fetched. They'd probably need a variance.
Well, we didn't think so, and we still don't think so. At the time this was done, it very much looked like it might become a residence.
Well, I'd like to interject something at this point. Ms. Schwartz does have a guest house on Hummerock, and when her family comes in to visit, they stay there. This is not going to be a guest house. It's a rec room.
Well,
And I would, and excuse me for interrupting, this is Adam Brodsky. And we have provided you with a floor plan to explain what is going into the unit. And we're not proposing any bedrooms. And as you heard Ms. Murphy testify, we're restricted on the number of bedrooms. So we are not applying for a guest house here. We're simply applying for this use as a recreation room as proposed and depicted upon the floor plans.
yeah, but I mean, the house could be sold tomorrow and the next owner would put a bed in there instead of a pool table, and it's a guest house. It's got a bathroom and a kitchen. And I would expect that it's going to be counted as a bedroom by the sewer commission.
Yeah, well, they've already said they're going to lose two bedrooms in the main house.
And I respectfully suggest that the fear for future enforcement issues is not grounds for denying a special permit. I can imagine any number of circumstances that may happen in the future, which would suggest that no project should be granted relief. So we will have to comply with the zoning bylaw, as will future owners have to comply with the zoning bylaw. And if they don't comply, Mr. Egan will pursue enforcement.
Sam, do you recall why this provision was put in? Was it simply that a boathouse was less intrusive, less active use than some sort of other residential use?
I believe that the plumbing provision was put in there to prevent it from becoming a guest house or residence. There was a strong indication that young Steve Bobo was living in the main house, and older Steve Bobo might very well want to convert that into a residence and or guest house. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little difficult to go back 20 years, and no question, 22 years. Who else is here to speak on this application? Anybody, Jen? Orem?
I don't see anybody. Oh, actually, Bob Egan. I'm going to promote him. Bob would like to say something.
Sure, please. Bob, you're on but muted.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I do remember. This was within my career, and I do remember it being very contentious down there. And I think it started out as Steve Bobo Sr. built a plastic boathouse for temporary use, and then when the neighbors get tired of looking at that for a number of years, he came through with this plan for this boathouse, because that was his avocation. He worked on boats, that was his hobby, and he wanted, from my recollection, nothing more than that. He didn't want to live there. He didn't want to convert into a guest house. So he was willing to put those conditions in just to move his project along. If there was actually no need of having running water or a bathroom in there, because his son lived right next door, and if he had to use the bathroom, it was only a short walk. So I think he agreed to that. He didn't protest it, because he knew that in his lifetime he had no need of it, and he wasn't looking any further beyond that when he didn't contest that condition that was put in there. It would have been difficult anyhow, because it is all ledge down there. I'm sure he said fine, and just let it go with that.
You mean the ledge as it would relate to septic systems and things?
Yeah, I mean, even if he were to run a line back to the main house, which is what people used to do when they would have these accessory buildings, it would still be difficult with, hammering or blasting, and he just, there was no need of it. His son lived right next door.
Right. What about the board? Do you have, points or questions of Bob?
I don't know that I have a question of Bob, but Bob's recollection, because I was certainly around when this was going on, seems to me to be accurate. And I don't know how we escape requiring an application for a special permit for a guest house here, since the prior decision explicitly prohibited it. I'm not saying whether or not I feel one way or another about a guest house there, but it would appear to me that that's what we should do.
Say that again, repeat yourself.
I think that since this was explicitly prohibited, to go forward, there should be another application for that use made to this board to decide whether or not a special permit should be granted for a guest house.
Do you run into a logical inconsistency, Adam's point that a guest house is allowed?
I understand that a guest house is allowed by special permit. We haven't granted one, and the previous board explicitly denied that use. I don't see any reason why they couldn't come before us to seek one on its merits, and it is allowed there by special permit.
So, Mr. Godek, I just point out that the ZBA in 1998 was not presented with an application for a guest house, and so they didn't deny the guest house. They simply added as a condition for an application for a boathouse use this condition. And we have presented to you an application for the recreation room because we don't intend to use it as a guest house. We intend to use it as a recreation room.
I still,
I'm not exactly sure.
I find that to be a bit of sophistry, given David's obviously appropriate point that it could certainly be used as a guest house, given what is being proposed there with plumbing and a kitchenette. So I'm not saying that I don't think a special permit is appropriate for this location and this building. It is permitted by special permit in this zone, and the building is already there. But I don't think that I feel comfortable where the previous board explicitly prohibited it and where it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck.
Peter, the only point I'd challenge you on is that a guest house on page attachment 1:2 is allowed. Yes, it doesn't. Special permit is not required for special.
If a special permit is not required for it,
not required,
then we shouldn't have it. Okay.
But a special permit was required for the original construction.
Could I give an answer to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were two separate lots down there, two standalone lots. Mr. Bobo Jr. owned them both. And when Mr. Bobo Sr. proposed putting the boathouse on that separate lot, I brought it to his attention that you can't have an accessory use on a standalone lot. The only way you can do what you want to do is to combine the lots.
Right.
And in so doing, he actually gave up a lot that could have been used as a a single lot exemption lot. A house could have been built there, but that's not what he chose to do. So that's why it required a trip to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because in combining the two lots, it was an opinion that he lost the protection when he combined the two lots. And it was more a dimensional reason that he went to the Zoning Board of Appeals, not the use. If those had been one, if that had been one lot, he could have put a boathouse, a barn, a greenhouse, any of the accessory allowed structures. It's just that because of that technicality of combining the two lots, that's what brought him to the board.
Okay.
And Mr. McMorris, that's why in my initial remarks, I wondered why we needed relief, because we needed special permit for the structure because of the non-conforming lot, but it didn't, the use as a boathouse didn't require authorization.
No, I understand that.
Yes, sir.
I'm just hung up on the condition.
Yes, sir, as am I. I would respectfully suggest, well, I will leave it to town council to opine whether it was lawful to do that in 1998. I would find it problematic presently.
Is there a hesitation to ask for a special permit for a guest house?
Again, we have the same problem.
It's not required, though.
Right, it's an allowed use.
No, I understand that, but you've got a problem because you've got a condition in the existing special permit for that building that doesn't allow you to do plumbing. And I understand that it's an allowed use. They have a recreation room in there, but they can't put plumbing in it. If they want to put plumbing in it, it seems to me they have to do something to get around that condition. And the easiest way to do that is to get a special permit for a guest house.
So the way I was trying to understand this is that I thought that those conditions, again, had to relate to the boathouse, which is what was being applied for. And since we're proposing a different use, it did not seem that those conditions would be appropriate to our present use, which is again allowed use. I struggle to logically connect all the dots here, which is why this is an unusual circumstance.
Well,
having said that, we did submit an application for alternative relief for a special permit for our proposed use. I don't know what we would achieve by amending that application to specify a guest house when we're not intending to use a guest house. And in fact, you're probably Mr. Wakeman is probably better protected by you limiting the use to the recreational use than to the guest house, because he's concerned with parking. I happen to think that the parking associated with either a guest house or a recreation room is de minimis. I can't imagine an influx of parking. I presume that's Ms. Schwartz, her family, and her guests who would use the property no differently than before.
As opposed to her college-age children.
I'm sorry?
As opposed to her college-age children. I mean,
well, as opposed to a commercial use.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, this is a typical residential use, no different than any other family in Cohasset who may have teenagers or college-age students. So.
Well, do we want?
I think town council would like to speak.
I'm not sure that I want to, but I compelled to. I'm at a loss here because I don't have any of the paperwork in front of me, and this is the very first I've heard anything about this. But I'm struggling with a couple of questions and a couple of things that maybe somebody can clarify for me. You have an existing special permit that if you are going to use, you have to comply with conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, correct?
And particularly 6.
Okay.
In this case.
One of several existing conditions if you want to use that special permit. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you are using that special permit, you have to comply with every single thing in that special permit, or you're going to be out of compliance and every enforcement thing will be thrown at you.
Correct.
If you no longer wish to rely on the special permit for something you want to do with your property, then it seems to me you throw out the entire special permit, meaning we're not going to use the special permit. We're not going to use it under any circumstances for what we have to use. We want to do something completely different. And that completely different use comes before the board independently for review and evaluation. And either it can be done, it cannot be done. You need a section 6 finding, you need its own special permit, but it comes to be evaluated independent of the special permit and the special permit conditions, because you're trying to say, we don't want to do what we can already do. We want to do something different. And I'm not saying that I agree with what Mr. Brodsky has said in terms of how this all plays out, or that I disagree, but I'm sitting here going, you either have the special permit and you operate within the 4 corners of that document, or you are not going to operate under that document and you want to do something completely independent. And can you do that? And how do you do that? That's how I see it. And I'm trying to understand if that's where we are. The other question I have is this still a non-conforming lot?
Mhm. Yes.
So you would still want to deal with the non-conforming lot issue and how, if at all, that impacts what you may want to do.
Yeah, it's a non-conforming lot with this barn, if you will, which complies with all the area requirements, other than the fact that the lot itself doesn't. But all the setbacks and so on and so forth, I believe. Isn't that right, Adam?
That's correct, Mr. Chittick. And I generally agree with Ms. Amara. If we wanted to continue the boathouse use, we would have to comply with all of the special conditions relating to the boathouse use. We no longer want to make use of the boathouse. We want to use it for a recreation room, for which we would need authorization, which is why we were seeking a building permit, because it's an allowed use within the district for which we don't require a special permit. I disagree with Mr. McMorris that I would have to somehow reauthorize the existing structure that had been previously authorized in 1998. And I draw a distinction between dimensional requirements and uses. We're not proposing any changes to the structure. It's now an existing structure. It's now probably deemed to be a lawful structure, the passage of time. And so now my thinking was that we're just dealing with the use. And since it's an allowed use, I thought it could be authorized via a building permit. But again, Mr. Egan directed us to you for your thinking and ultimate decision on that matter. So I'm in general agreement with Ms. Amara as how she's thinking about this, because that's how I think about it.
I guess the thing I'm struggling with is the special permit was required for the building, and the conditions were put in the special permit for the building. So I guess my question is, do the conditions go with the building, or do the conditions go with the use? If it goes with the building, it seems to me that you've still got the problem with the condition. If it goes with the use, you change the use, then the condition doesn't apply. But I don't know the answer to the question of whether it goes with the building or it goes with the use. It just seems to me that if you're applying for a special permit in the first place for the building, and the condition goes in on that building, that you've got to do something to cancel that out. And it seems to me the best avenue is to get a new special permit.
Dave, the application was to construct on the premises a barn boathouse, the barn, a wood frame construction of, various and sundry dimensions, 24 feet high. So it was to build a boathouse. And a barn for seasonal storage of, you know, probably deck chairs and bicycles and who knows what. But it was to construct
But they didn't,
A
but they
building.
didn't need a special permit for a boathouse.
Right.
Because it's an allowed accessory use. They
Right.
needed a special permit for the building.
right.
Yes.
And
A
the-
special permit for the construction of the barn is
So-
accordingly granted, subject to the following conditions, one of which, number 6, was a further stipulation that it have no plumbing and not be used as a guest house. So
But
if you go to
Yeah,
town council's point with respect to you live with the four corners,
and nothing in reality says, again, to play devil's advocate, that it has to be used only as a boathouse until the end of time. I mean, that, you
no,
know,
but but it does say that this structure can't have any plumbing.
I know what it says, but I'm going back to Dave's kind of
Yeah, no, I'm with
question about,
David on that.
was it the structure or the use? And it was the structure.
I mean, it would seem to me that the most elegant solution to this is for us to consider whether having plumbing in that building is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what's there now. It's just a matter of changing the special permit, using the general considerations that we use when we look at special permits. I'm baffled by why we are making this a lot more complicated than it really needs to be.
Yeah, Adam was going to say something.
No, I was just going to point out that the condition pertains to the use, which I can't explain because it's not a condition relating to the structural and dimensional requirement. That's the oddity here. But the restriction in the condition is for use. And I don't see how that can be related to the structure, if that makes any sense.
Well, no, the condition is both use and physical. It's physical with respect to the construction because it says no plumbing. Then it segues into use. So I read 6 as having 2 stipulations, not just 1.
And again, I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking. I think it's Mr. Wakeman. The plumbing issue obviously relates to the guest house use because you can't have a guest house use without the plumbing necessary for it.
Well, but it also says no plumbing nor be used.
Yes, sir.
I mean, could I put an art gallery in there? Because nobody wants to have a boathouse anymore there. That's for
No
sure.
plumbing. You could put an art gallery possibly, but without plumbing.
I can't
Could
speak
I,
to
could I
the,
get an occupancy permit?
I can't speak to the building code requirements for an art gallery.
No, I can't either. Good point.
Well, and David, when you talked about, if it was before us as being substantially more detrimental or not, right? The second piece of that is that when we take a look at the public health piece and the sewer and the septic, if I understood correctly, you were saying, Ms. Murphy was saying that it would be an agreement made that 2 of the existing bedrooms wouldn't be used if there were bathroom facilities at this recreation room. So if I understood that correctly, then would that put a condition essentially on the home to limit the use of bedrooms for the septic? I mean, for the sewer, excuse me.
Yeah, I would presume that would be a condition of the sewer connection permit. The town would place whatever restrictions would be appropriate in order to authorize the sewer connection. And so we would be governed obviously by that sewer permit.
Couldn't it also be part of a section 6 finding that to make the finding that it's not going to be more detrimental, you will not have more flow than you otherwise would have on that site by restricting? In other words, we don't necessarily care if you have 3 bedrooms in the house and 1 in the boathouse, or none in the boathouse and 4 in the house, as long as there is no increase in sewage, or you're not on septic, in flow or gallonage, or so you're not expanding any use of this system.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's in our jurisdiction, but
But you could find that it would be more detrimental if it's going to be expanding the use.
true.
I would presume that we would have your standard condition that the special permit would be subject to the applicant receiving all additional approvals that would be necessary in order to make use of the property. And so, we would be subject to, obviously, conditions of our sewer connection permit and whatever is required for a building permit and any other authorization that we would need to do this.
What's the requirement that when you go for your sewer permit, that it must be restricted in the way you're describing?
I can't speak to that, Ms. Amara. I
might be able to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Egan can. Thank you.
If I could, the sewer department, what they call equivalent dwelling units, and which they say is 4. And if somebody wanted to increase the number of bedrooms in their house, they have to pay a fee of, I think it's $7,500 per bedroom. And I assume that Ms. Schwartz doesn't feel the need to have that many, to increase the number of bedrooms. So, and she could probably answer, but maybe trading bedrooms that were in the house for the whatever the use is in the building. The sewer commission will let you buy your way into more bedrooms if you choose.
So you could end up in a situation where you would essentially be allowing an extra bedroom on this property as an outcome of this.
Yeah, and that happens. People even adding bedrooms inside an existing dwelling. There is a fee that has to be paid to the sewer commission for that.
And if the sewer commission thinks they can handle it, then we don't care.
Yeah, I don't think it's a zoning issue. Yeah.
I'm not making any judgment about whether you think that makes sense or not. I'm just saying if there's a concern about having an additional bedroom and what that does to the use of the property, sewage being the one thing that seems to be the most dramatic in terms of impact, whether that gets addressed or not, or if there are other issues that may or may not impact the board's decision. If instead of it being limited to 4, she exercises the option and you end up essentially with a 5-bedroom house on the lot. I'm not raising any judgment about whether you should or shouldn't allow that. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around what are the potential ramifications and how do we get everyone where they want to be, if possible. And not having seen any of the paperwork or any of the plans does put me at a disadvantage, I will admit.
Yeah.
Well, we've got an application for a special permit for what you're calling a recreation room, but I'll tell you, I'm assuming it's a guest house. So I think I'd just as soon have an opportunity to think about and deliberate and consider the issues that we need to consider under that section of the bylaw for special permit for a guest house.
Me too.
Okay. Sounds like we're at a juncture. We would like to continue it, but do we want to continue it for more information and discussion in a month, or do we want to continue it to at least consider, not necessarily approve, but consider a draft decision?
I mean, I don't know how, if it affects, if we're looking at it in the context of a guest house, if it affects whether anyone else would want to speak about it.
Well, I guess alternatively, the applicant could withdraw without prejudice and file perhaps a more focused request for a special permit that deals with guest house or some residential, part-time residential occupancy. I don't know.
So we're not prepared to withdraw our application. We haven't asked for the use of a guest house. We're trying to be focused in our request for relief. You're asking us to expand that. I'm happy to speak with the client in that regard. I think we're falling into the trap that happened in 1998, where the zoning board is considering uses that are not being proposed and trying to articulate this. So I think this is getting, it's not, again, I'm happy to have that conversation with the client. I know, Mr. Chittick, that you wanted me to identify other guest houses or accessory residential structures in the area. I'm happy to do that. If there's any additional information we can provide, I'm happy to do so. So if the board's inclination is to get more information, we certainly request a continuance to the next meeting. I would have to speak to the client about changing the application. I don't think that, well, I'd have to speak to the client regarding that.
Okay. I just would interject here that I don't have any problem at all with the recreation room if there's no plumbing out there.
Right, and the proposal is for plumbing for the kitchenette and the bathroom.
Right.
Because otherwise, Dave, I mean, to be practical, where are people going to go? Yes, they could hike up the hill a bit.
I understand that, but I think it runs into conflict with the conditions that are on the existing special permit. And I think that with a bathroom and a bathtub and a kitchenette, that it looks a lot more like a guest house than it does like a recreation room.
Yes.
So, and that's the context in which I want to consider this, whether it's applied for or not. It's the nomenclature. I'm more concerned with the what's actually there than what they call it.
Would you be comfortable at all with a bathroom and no kitchen facilities whatsoever? Bathrooms that people are watching TV and drinking a beer.
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to see it and think about it.
Adam, will you have any bright thoughts in the next couple of weeks on how to extricate this solution out of this?
With very high expectations, I thought I already presented you with my brilliant thoughts as to how to extricate.
Well, they were brilliant, obviously, but you never know.
They were well argued, but it still quacks like a duck.
The problem is the 1998 decision is, I don't think it's enforceable, but that's not what we're here to argue about. We're arguing about an allowed use in an existing building that was authorized for construction in 1998. And again, I can refine my thinking and try and articulate this in a way that makes the board more comfortable. But the origin of the problem is an inappropriate decision in 1998. And I'm trying not to make things worse.
Well, the only part of that decision that's, to my mind, valid or operational today is condition 6.
Relevant, yeah.
The other 5, I mean, you're going to tear down the plastic structure. Okay, the plastic structures was torn down 21 years ago. Okay, you're not going to, have a lot of undue noise from boat building. Well, that's obsolete, and so on it goes.
Yes, I agree. The problem is the zoning board prohibited an allowed use in the zoning district that was not even requested by the applicant. That's the fundamental problem.
Well, they put the plumbing condition in there for whatever reason.
And again, I thought that would relate.
They connected it to whether or not it would be more substantially detrimental to the neighborhood, which is a reasonable thing to be considering. So I don't have a problem with that part of that condition at all.
Well, again, we've talked about this, and it's been a long night. I don't want to belabor it. Again, I have no information on that. The suggestion from Mr. Egan is that perhaps there was some concern regarding compliance with Title V, and therefore that issue has been cured by the fact that the property's been placed on sewer. I read the plumbing issue as relating to the use, because again, I wouldn't ordinarily see plumbing associated with a boathouse, but I would see plumbing associated with a guest house. But I'm speculating, but it's the same fundamental.
Aren't we all?
Same fundamental problem is that I think these are unlawful conditions that should never have been put in the original permit, and I don't think have relevance to the application before you.
Well, one solution, it may not be the right one, to my mind, is to really redo the whole thing. You know, just this decision may be, as you say, illegal or at least not actionable. It's not really very relevant anymore. You know, the building has been built. If it's on a non-conforming lot, and if they want to make exterior alterations, they'd have to come before us anyway.
But they don't want to make exterior.
Right, I know they don't. But I said if they ever do, they'll have to come before us. But otherwise, you know, it's a question of, well, anyway.
I mean, it's provision 6 is in black and white. Whether or not it was a smart provision to put in, it's there.
Yeah.
And I don't see how you can ask the building inspector to ignore it.
I agree, as long as it exists in this decision.
Yeah.
But
the current owner bought the house with that in place, or the lot, or the property. And I think the simplest thing to do is try to get I mean, it's an allowed use. I can't see a lot of risk here, but you know, I can't project.
As I said, I'm baffled.
Yeah.
I would suggest we're not going to solve it tonight. I would like to, sorry, Jen?
So just I just wanted to say that we do have a couple of people raising hands, but this is all about talking about the guest house, which is not truly before us. So I would recommend that people have questions, they email them to me and I can distribute to the board until we know what's before us. I'd also like to publicly apologize for essentially snaring Cindy Amara, but I just had without giving her any information at all, but I just felt this was a complicated issue, and in preparation today, and I worked all day and then forgot to ask you. So I thank you so much for staying. And then I don't know, I think you continue it and then.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to continue it, and I don't think we need a draft decision at this point. I think we need to have a solution.
I think we lost Attorney Brodsky though.
He quit.
He was like,
his time was up.
He quit in frustration.
I find that hard to believe.
All right, so
I'll second a motion to continue.
Okay. All in favor? Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Peter.
Bill Higginson, aye.
Okay.
Peter Gertica, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay. All right. So that'll be continued until next time. And I think I'd like to talk to the town attorney, but I think if there are thoughts, since we can't deliberate between now and September as a group, I don't know whether we can develop white papers of points of view and funnel them through, or just wait until the next hearing. I don't know.
I would be inclined to happily receive independent questions, thoughts, views, as well as any of the materials that are currently before the board.
that you haven't seen.
that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fair.
And I'm sure you're likely to receive something additional from Attorney Brodsky.
Sure. Okay, why don't we follow that approach, which is pretty standard for us.
Okay.
All right, so that's been moved and seconded and voted on unanimously. We had 2 hearings that we've continued tonight just for the purpose of getting a draft decision in, I believe. Was it 2? Yes, the Tedeschi dock and the, well, Oak Street is,
I don't think
Far from-
I don't think we're ready to do a draft decision on Oak Street. do
no,
you?
I agree with you. No, when I guess I was wishfully thinking. We only have the dock. Now, does anybody want to volunteer for the dock decision?
Cindy, you can go. I don't want you to feel like you have to stay.
If you don't need me, I'll listen.
Sorry,
to-
sorry, Chairman Chittick. I just didn't want to,
Okay, who wants to do the dock? Who's done the last couple of decisions? Let's put it that way.
I might be due.
You do? Okay, Matt's due. He's going to do the dock. God
Okay.
bless him. All right.
Okay. All
Like,
right.
two interesting hearings in one night. That's a nice change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, do we have the conservation information from that?
I'll get that. He was saying he didn't have it yet. You weren't here yet, so we're gonna, right? Or maybe I'll get it for you. The order of conditions.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank
It
you.
was apparently approved verbally or whatever, and they're just writing up the order of conditions now. He doesn't think there'll be any bombshell there.
Okay.
All right. So as soon as I get that, Matt, I'll get that to you. And I had one thing to run by you all, except for the minutes. The minutes were really simple. So who's going to approve them? Let's go. Let's go.
All right, I make a motion to approve the minutes of July
Second.
Without edit.
without edit, just perfection. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Woody
Aye.
Chick, aye. Yeah.
Aye.
Doris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Thank you.
Peter Gerdekai. aye.
So
Davidson, aye.
So I just wanted to mention that we have, the board may recall a couple of permits being filed for back in 2000, I think it was 16, 17, regarding 488 Jerusalem Road. We did a garage, and then you did, I think it ended up being a raise, and it was an addition, and then became a raise and reconstruct because the house was not salvageable. And this is, so it was 2007, it was 2018 because the permit was pulled in 2018. It's now being constructed. We've received, and then there was a secondary permit that was filed for for a couple of reasons, which Bob can explain at some point. But that has, secondary permit was appealed by the neighbors. Then the attorney for Stasco's appealed Bob's letter. And now there's a third appeal coming in for some other reason that I'm not certain of. I just heard about it today. And this is all to do with one property. So it was going to be 3 notices, 3 applications. And so I plan on talking to our town council saying, it's 3 appeals. How do we hear them all in a row? It's all 3 different reasons for the same property. Is this something that possibly should go to mediation? Like, what is it? What is the end game? Why wouldn't we all try to talk?
Is this a Stasco property also on Linden Drive?
It's on the corner of Linden.
I know he's got an address in Jerusalem, but
Right.
but his garage and everything empties.
It's on Linden. Yeah, he has that side driveway. So I'm just trying to figure out what to do since I think I'm going to have 2 other applications. We have 2 continued applications and then those 3 appeals. I would suggest we have a meeting just dedicated to that in later September.
Just to the Stasco.
Just to 488, because I don't see how we could do everything we will possibly have in September. And then we could just dedicate an entire meeting to 488 so that, because also all the work I will have to do to advertise the 3, notice the 3, and I need to focus on our next meeting. So that was my suggestion, was a date in later September where there are appeals, we have timelines, but we're fine and we would get extensions. It's also my hope that people could work together and try to figure it out, but I don't know what the third appeal is. And my plan is to scan them to you sooner than later so you can see them all, and I'll separate them by who they are so you can start reviewing them. But I wanted to throw that out. I don't have a date in mind. I was thinking, you know, if you wanted to look at your calendar, because we're meeting September 8th. We didn't do that at the beginning, or we may have, we're meeting into October 6th, but I lost my audio. So we could try to do the third, maybe September 15th or the 22nd.
We didn't talk about September from a timing standpoint, and I had told you once that I was probably not going to be here in August, and then I pushed it back, and I am pretty much going to be out most of September, including the 8th. And now that's depending on COVID, but at the moment my plan is to leave on the 5th and be gone for 3+ weeks.
Out west, right? And so
Out
you're
west,
thinking,
yeah.
so
I can Zoom.
You
Yeah.
can still be a part of it.
So I can be part of it, but I won't physically be, and I don't think it matters
Well, I don't
anymore,
think it
but-
doesn't matter. None of us are
Okay.
going to
You
be.
can do it from
Okay.
anywhere.
You're
All
gonna be
right.
on the same screen as us, Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All
By
right.
the way,
Rats.
Peter, what's
Actually,
your
this
back-
is better. You can't get out of it the way
No.
you used to.
That's true.
Peter, what's your background behind
My
you?
background, that is a bunch of pilings in Boston Harbor at Lewis Wharf in the fog.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I've got
I
a whole
like it.
bunch of virtual backgrounds, and I find that most of them are either too colorful or too busy or whatever. And that one's kind of, I don't know, pale. So it's,
You definitely stand out from the fog.
well, I may be in the fog. I think I was in the fog on a couple of these hearings. These were, you know, I think you said interesting. Yeah, that's like the old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was part of the decision on Oak Street last time, but I love the decision. So I'm going to have a hard time giving that one up.
I understand. I've moved a little bit the other way, but who knows?
I could tell. Yeah.
So we should.
Did you write that one, Woody? It smacks of your
I
prose.
don't know. I don't think I did. As a matter of
David,
fact.
David wrote it.
David wrote it.
Oh, David, you wrote it.
Hey,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right.
So we
No
should
No
pick
wonder
a
I
date.
liked it so much. No wonder I liked it so much.
Okay. So just a reminder, so we're still live, and so what I'd like to do is maybe just pick that other September date if we could.
Well, I'm
Okay.
not going anywhere as far as I know. So
So do you want to have a meeting? We don't want to have them 2 weeks in a row. So do you want to do the 22nd, September 22nd?
Sure.
it's okay by me.
All right. That's really great. I just
Okay.
think that's a lot for one night, and I want to try to make sure that I do it correctly. And I did ask the question of the council saying, you know, why are we doing 3? I've never seen this. Maybe it happens in other communities, but I'd like to do a little research on that as well.
Are the first 2 on completely separate grounds, Jen?
Yes. And then this is a third, something else. So I
And
think
is it your thinking that if they got together, they could be one appeal with 3 separate grounds for the appeal?
it was my hope that they could get together and not have any appeals.
Oh, well.
But you know, it is what we'll just hear them all, but I don't want to get it. It would be a lot in one night, particularly in this format. I think it would be way too much. And we can even start earlier if you wanted to start at 6:30. No, you guys are like 7:30. I know. Well, it's muggy again. It's gonna be 90 tomorrow. 90.
Yeah.
So are we proposing to have 2 meetings in September then, on the 8th and the 20, what?
Second.
8th and the 22nd.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'd make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Do
And let's get our thoughts on each of these two difficult decisions, if we have any solutions or whatever, to the attorney. And Jen, you can let us know how to.
Right, so I'll
Funnel
talk
that
to
into
Cindy and figure that out, and then
Okay,
I'll make sure you have all contact information. But you can send everything, you can actually, any questions or thoughts, you can send directly to me, and then I
All
can
right.
so filter them to her. Does that work?
Yep.
All right, 9:49. Okay. It was
All
lovely
right.
to see you all.
Well, it's wonderful to see everybody.
Thank you for organizing this so well. This one wasn't easy.
Oh, there's a lot of people. And so
Very
great
good.
to,
We're getting better.
yeah, practice.
All right.
All right, thank
Okay.
you all.
All right.
Good
Stay
night.
well.
Thanks, good night, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.